Alrighty, so happy New Year's Eve, everybody. And I know by the time most of you watch this in the East Coast, it'll be pretty close in terms of the year turning to 2023. Or if you're watching this in Europe, well, welcome to 2023 and welcome to a brand new year of the calendar. And I know in the West Coast that we are one of the last place to basically have our year and the calendar turns to 2023. But before that, I am going to do a video looking at some of the storyline that happened in 2022 in MLS, because what a perfect way to do it right on New Year's Eve in terms of just looking back at the 20 interesting storyline that happened in MLS. And there was definitely a lot of it. I mean, I could have easily spent an hour creating 50 interesting storyline that happened in MLS, but I'm not going to do that. And in some of these, I'm kind of condensed in terms of them could have made it into multiple points if I would have actually done like the 100 interesting storyline that happened in the 2022 or in 2022 in MLS. So the first thing that was an interesting storyline is MLS Cup. I mean, it is pretty much set in stone that this is going to be going down as one of the greatest MLS Cup finals that we have ever seen. But you can also say that this is the craziest MLS Cup that we have ever seen in this league history, because what we saw in the game between LAFC versus the Philadelphia Union just kind of epitomized what MLS is all about, where you have a league where sometimes games just does not make sense whatsoever. And then sometimes there are games that I mentioned many times of the fact that the game, of course, have gone after dark, or it has reached kind of peak MLS moment, which I think that MLS Cup basically shown that. I mean, it was just crazy how the storyline is, and that it was just so unpredictable of the fact that you just thought that maybe one team was going to win MLS Cup, and then here comes a late equalizer to really change everything. I mean, that MLS Cup between LAFC and the Philadelphia Union will be something that not many people will ever forget, unless of course you are a Union fan, where you definitely want to forget that MLS Cup because they came on the losing end. But yeah, that's going to be an MLS Cup that we're going to talk about for a very, very long time. And speaking of which, the winner, LAFC, of course, becoming the first team to win MLS Cup and Supporters Shield since 2017. And I believe they're only the fourth team to win MLS Cup after winning the Supporters Shield. So we've talked about before the Supporters Shield curse. Is it real? Is it fake? Well, at least for the past couple of years, it looked like it was real, because last year we saw New England having the best season in MLS history with the most points, and then they got knocked out in the first round. Albeit, I know Rev fans are going to use the notion, the fact that, well, they basically had 3 weeks off and that they were pretty rusty coming into that game. But still, you of course have to play the game, and unfortunately they weren't able to move on to the next round. And then we remember what happened in 2020, where the Union also won the Supporters Shield, winning their first ever trophy. And yeah, they basically fall in the first hurdle, losing to New England in the first ever game. So the Supporters Shield curse was definitely a big thing, where if you win it, then most likely you're not going to progress very far into the playoffs. But LAFC basically defeat all that narrative, and they only go on to go all the way to MLS Cup, and then winning the whole thing. And then the third thing that was interesting about 2022 in MLS is there wasn't really as much upsets and Cinderella run in the playoffs. So as much as we saw that crazy MLS Cup final, keep in mind, this I think was the first time since 2003 that we actually had an MLS Cup final where the two number one seed for respective conference face off against each other. And that's crazy to say, because knowing with the way how now we have more teams compared to what we had back in the early 2000s, in the infant year of this league history. And not to mention the fact that we have single elimination now compared to a previous season where, in the infant year it was like the best of three, or in the later years it was a two-legged affair. You would expect that maybe there was going to be some upsets, and maybe there's going to be some Cinderella run like what we saw last year with Real Salt Lake making all the way to the Western Conference Final. But that was kind of not the case in this season. I mean, there really wasn't any teams that I could say that made a Cinderella run. And in terms of the upset, there wasn't a whole ton of it. Like road team, I think they only won 2 games throughout the entire playoffs, and I think that just kind of continued the argument of how important it is to, of course, get home field advantage, because home field advantage in the playoffs, it's definitely a huge advantage, as it says in its name. And that yeah, I think that, I will say that because of that, it does kind of lose a little bit of the luster and the fact that I think, besides what happened in MLS Cup, this playoffs, I would say it could be a little bit forgettable, considering pretty much all the favorites, of course, won. And that I also want to mention that one of the interesting storyline related to that is that there wasn't really a lot of crazy game that happened in the playoffs. Sure, yes, we had El Trafico, and that was kind of a crazy game. But then besides that, I mean, I don't really quite remember another game that I saw in the playoffs that were just kind of just memorable and will be talked about for a bit. I mean, maybe the one between NYCFC versus the Philadelphia Union maybe came close to that, because the Union went from 1-0 down to make it 3-1 in a span of just 12 minutes. But besides that, again, there really isn't a lot of game. Or maybe I would say the game between RSL and Austin kind of had that MLS After Dark kind of feeling, with Austin getting an equalizer to tie the game to send to extra time. But even then, that was kind of a game where you just kind of had a feeling Austin was going to win it, with so much pressure that they were putting against Real Salt Lake. So again, besides El Trafico and what we saw in MLS Cup, it was kind of a very forgettable MLS Cup playoffs this season, and that maybe that's also due to the fact that there was not much upsets and Cinderella run. Now, at number 4, we saw the Seattle Sounders winning the CONCACAF Champions League and becoming the first MLS team to do so. So I'm not going to dwell too much about this, because I've already mentioned a lot of time of how big of an achievement that is, not only to the Seattle Sounders, but just to this league in general. The fact that for so many years we've been asking the question, is an MLS team going to finally conquer that mountain of the CONCACAF Champions League? And the Seattle Sounders says this is the year to do so, as they were able to do it and finally cement the argument that MLS has clearly arrived, and that they are definitely going to trying to at least compete or even surpass Liga MX as the premier league in terms of all these North American leagues that we see in the CONCACAF region. And then number 5, we got Orlando City winning their first ever trophy, but it was Sacramento Republic winning our hearts doing the U.S. Open Cup run. And I think another headlines I will say about that is the Spygate scandal involving Orlando City before they play in that U.S. Open Cup final. Now, as much as I was hoping maybe there was going to be some sanction that goes against Orlando City, I just had a feeling it wasn't going to happen, especially with the way that they didn't announce the sanction after when they play the final and that Orlando City won the trophy. You just had a feeling that they weren't going to do much. I mean, in a alternative world or in a perfect world, I think there could be definitely a sense that Orlando City should definitely be fined more than they got after they were found out that they, of course, created a little bit of a Spygate kind of situation, spying the Republic in terms of their training session, and that, I would say the harshest punishment would have been that U.S. Open Cup final will be deemed as neglected, which just kind of took away that trophy away and just kind of neglect that title that Orlando City, of course, had. But besides the scandal, we talk about Sacramento Republic. Even though they lost the final, they definitely won the hearts of many soccer fans around the U.S. with the way that it just kind of proves that the U.S. Open Cup thing is still a thing that hasn't lost its luster. Sure, it's definitely not as prestige as we see maybe in the FA Cup in England, but it's definitely shown that at least for the past couple of years we have seen those giant killing, and we have seen some of those big upsets. And Sacramento, I mean, making history too, becoming the first USL Championship team to make it into the Open Cup finals since Charleston Battery did it back in 2008, only becoming the third USL Championship team to do so, to make it into the final. And that even though they didn't become the first team to do so since Rochester Rhino did it in '99, it's still a great achievement. And that again, they didn't win it, but they definitely won the hearts of many fans that was rooting for them throughout the run. And then at number 6, the renaissance of well-known player playing in Europe and coming to MLS to either get one last paycheck in their prime or young players. And that's kind of interesting to highlight the last two things, because so many times I know there's been talks about how MLS has always been a retirement league. I don't think that has been the case, and especially with the way that we have now seen a couple of players that are kind of playing in their prime. A great example was Benedeschi coming from Juventus to Toronto FC, and this is a guy that he's still in his prime of his career, been with the Italian national team, and all of a sudden he made that big move to come to MLS. Now, I'm not sure if that a lot of that has some convincing from his teammate Lorenzo Insigne, who is another guy that I don't think he's really there just for one last paycheck, because he's still relatively young enough where he definitely has the quality to be a decent player. Heck, I mean, he is now the most expensive player in league history, so TFC is definitely bang on that. But also, we talk about young players coming into MLS, and that I think the big name coming out that fits that category is Ricky Puig. I mean, this is a kid that he came out of the La Masia Academy, and that he was definitely a big, not only a label as a wonder kid and could be the next best thing. I mean, I even mentioned when he decided to come to the Galaxy and come to MLS. This was a guy that was supposed to be tallied as the next Xavi for Barcelona. Now, obviously, it did not work out, because it looks like now Barcelona has moved on from Ricky Puig, and they're moving more toward Gavi as the next Xavi for Barcelona. But there's no doubt that Ricky Puig coming to MLS is definitely maybe just a watershed kind of moment, where for those players that are kind of just, they didn't quite make it into Europe, whether they're wonder kid or they're just not really doing well, if they can come to MLS and develop, they can definitely get a chance to move back to Europe and get some offer. And judging by the fact that how good Ricky Puig did for the Galaxy when he came in, there's no doubt that the Galaxy are going to receive a lot of offer for Ricky Puig. I mean, after all, he's a La Masia graduate and a former Barcelona player, and that there's going to be a lot of teams that is looking into that and are scouting him, that maybe he has proven to have enough to get back into the big level in Europe. And I think that could be maybe open a pipeline of some of these other players that maybe have gone from big academy in European teams, and they kind of do not do well, but they just decide to come to MLS, develop, and decide to return them. And that's kind of also now maybe the new philosophy that MLS is trying to preach, with the way that they always had the philosophy of being a selling league, but now it's getting to a part where they're tapping even into the European market and trying to develop some of these players that again didn't make it in with the big team after they were in their academy for a very long time, but now has a second shot to potentially make it back into those highlights. Now, moving on to number 7, we got the Joseph Martinez versus Atlanta United front office and Gonzalo Pineda. And what that basically means is the fact that Joseph Martinez, we talk about the saga that he's been going through both on and off the field, and that it really reached a boiling point near the end of the season, where Joseph Martinez was openly slamming at the front office, and also even at Gonzalo Pineda of showing his displeasure with the club. And it just gone so bad that Gonzalo Pineda had to even sit him out and bench him for 1 or 2 games because of his bad attitude that he was giving. And that, this is still kind of an ongoing situation too, because as we speak, Joseph Martinez still have not been sold to any team, and that it still remain to be an Atlanta United player. And the longer this offseason continue, again, I know coming into the season there was definitely a sense that he was going to be sold off to somewhere else. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case, because again, there's not really a lot of offer for a lot of teams to potentially get Joseph Martinez, and I can understand why that is the case, because there's not going to be a lot of teams that is willing to try to have to spend a hefty amount of gam that Atlanta United is going to demand, and basically trying to take that risk and hope that Joseph Martinez can go back to the players that we saw when he came into the league. Because again, as good as Joseph Martinez has been when doing his time with Atlanta United, I just think he has kind of lost a step ever since he suffered that torn ACL injury, and that again, it's just getting to a point where he is now openly clashing to the front office because of showing his pleasure and the fact the team is not doing well, even though in theory he's also not pulling the weight that we've seen him done and carry this team as we see that he's done with this Atlanta United team for the past couple of years. And then moving on to number 8, I'm sorry. Miguel Angel Ramirez infamous worst screw quote. So that quote is definitely going to be live up as one of the most infamous quote that will ever mentioned in MLS history. And there's been a lot of infamous quote that has been thrown out in the league 26 years existing. But I think this is definitely going to go up as one of the top 10 or even in the top 5, where Miguel Angel Ramirez openly said that Charlotte FC were screwed because of the fact that they did not have enough players in their roster that he feel is going to be enough for them to compete in the season. And also, not to mention, this is where he really started to fall out with the front office, to a point where the front office had no choice but to fire him. But yeah, again, it's definitely going to be something that, again, I will give Miguel Angel Ramirez credit. At least he was brutally honest about the response. We've seen so many head coaches trying to kind of spin around and just kind of maybe dodge the question, maybe trying to use some filler response to just not really kind of reveal to the media the fact that the team is in total chaos. But that's not Miguel Angel Ramirez. He openly said that he thinks the team is completely screwed because of the lack of roster depth and the fact that they definitely don't have enough players in terms of really be competing for a full season without just running the team to the ground. But yeah, that was kind of interesting, and that was something that I will also say they started kind of becoming a meme because of how infamous and how interesting that quote was. Now, moving on to number 9, the Hern Losada and Matthias Almeida fiasco. So this is another thing similar to the Miguel Angel Ramirez situation, where both of these head coach fell out with the front office. I mean, the Matthias Almeida fiasco, I feel like this was even more extreme than Hern Losada, because I think with the Hern Losada fiasco, it was similar to the Gabriel Heinze situation, where not only he fell out with the front office, but then he decided to go with the Gabriel Heinze kind of treatment, just pushing the players to the absolute limit, and decided to not even give them enough food or water during training session to really run the team to the ground, and players really got very frustrated about that and kind of turned against him. But simply for Matthias Almeida, we knew he was going to be a failure coming into his last year of his contract. We knew that he was not happy to be the head coach of the San Jose Earthquakes, and the fact that the Quakes front office did nothing in terms of trying to plead him and even trying any last attempt to hope that he can stay with the club, and the fact that he just clearly sabotaging the team because he doesn't even want to be there. Yeah, I mean, it just shows the fact that, again, it shouldn't be anybody surprised the Quakes got off to such a terrible start like that and eventually finished pretty close to the bottom of the standings. But actually not just the bottom of the standings, they actually did finish at the bottom of the standings. But yeah, it's interesting to see those two fiasco kind of play out. And I think another thing that's kind of interesting about this is now Hern Losada going to Montreal. That's also a very interesting storyline, with the way that I don't think a lot of people would have thought that Hern Losada was going to be stick around in the league after the situation and the bridges that he burned with DC United. Now, moving on to number 10, we got FC Cincinnati not winning their 4th straight wooden spoon, but instead making the playoffs for the first time in their franchise history, and even winning a playoff game for the first time. And that has to be something that, I feel like every Cincinnati fan deserves to see a successful season that they had. And that Pat Nolan, I'm not going to say that he kind of got robbed in terms of the coach of the year, but I will say that he kind of got robbed in terms of the fact that he wasn't even considered to be a top 3 candidate for coach of the year. What he has done for FC Cincinnati is just nothing short of a miracle. And keep in mind, this is a team that coming into this year, they didn't really change a lot until the middle part of the season, when they started adding pieces, and that's when they were already decent. So this just goes to show you that if you have maybe a change of philosophy in terms of the head coaching position, and how head coaching in this league is definitely very important, because it can change like the mentality of the team. It clearly showed with FC Cincinnati, because he really guided this team that was just considered to be the lovable loser to now being a team that not only could be making the playoffs, but they could be making the playoffs down the year. They're very much set up to finally start having a good run for the first time in their franchise history. And like I said, Cincinnati fans deserve it because it's been a miserable both first three season with them in the league, become laughing stock time after time, suffering some of the most heartbreaking losses in the process, but finally able to find success is something that they definitely deserve. And they're definitely hoping now that for this second season, or the second season under Pat Nolan and under this new front office, and also with the way that this is the fifth season for this team, they hope that they can make it to the playoffs and go even deeper into the playoffs. And then at number 11, we got CF Montreal, a dark horse season that was followed by selling almost all their asset in one off season. Now, we knew that this was going to be the case where they were going to sell some of their most talented player off to Europe for a big sum of money, but I didn't think that they were just going to completely strip down almost to the bare bone heading into this season in just one off season like that. And that's where I'm pretty sure Montreal fans are very concerned about this team for this upcoming season, because again, they really haven't added a lot of pieces in terms of replacing some of the most important ones that they lost in this one off season, and not to mention losing their head coach and Wilfred Nancy. That's definitely going to hurt them as much as losing some of their key players like Georgi Mihailovic and even Alistair Johnston. But yeah, we'll see for this upcoming season where they're if they can, of course, bounce, or well, I wouldn't say bounce back, but maybe continue to be successful and maybe make it to the playoffs. I mean, I'm assuming they're going to probably have a down year, just like what we saw with New England after they started selling pieces too. But let's just hope, at least in CF Montreal perspective, that they don't follow the same path that New England did, where they sell off pieces and they just never got going. And in the second or in the very next season after they decided to sell asset and earn a bunch of money out of it. At number 12, we got Charlotte FC breaking the MLS attendance record. So, for the past couple of years, Atlanta United pretty much owns every single attendance record in MLS. But Charlotte decided that, it is our time now to basically break the attendance record. Now, mind you, yes, Bank of America Stadium is slightly bigger than Mercedes-Benz Stadium down in Atlanta. So that does give a chance for Charlotte to break the record, which, not surprisingly, they did in their first ever game. And that, obviously, when you have your first ever game in franchise history, that's going to build up a lot of hype. So it's not a big surprise that Charlotte was going to have like 75,000 plus inside the stadium. But the other thing I think should be also interesting to see is the fact that, despite the fact that they had a lot of chaos coming into the first game, fans still showed up to watch this team play. And even after when they broke the MLS attendance record, I mean, they were still averaging about 30,000 plus fans every single game. Now, obviously, as that first game was followed, there was definitely more empty seats that we've seen around the stadium, but still, it's still respectable for them to able to average that many fans every single game, and that even during the rough time, you've seen that there was fans that were willing to stick around and watch this team play. And we'll see whether that maybe continue as Charlotte maybe turn around their fortune, or the fact that maybe this is just kind of an expansion season boost, where we have always seen this before, where teams in their expansion year, that's where the hype begins, and everybody, of course, will support this team no matter they suck or not. But you can only do that for so long until you really need to start to pull in some resort, and we'll see whether or not if Charlotte can do that heading into the second season. Now, number 19, or not number 19, I'm sorry, we're not actually down to there yet. But at number 13, the unlucky 13, we got Gonzalo Higuain, remarkable comeback year to carry Inter Miami to the playoffs. Remember how Gonzalo Higuain and how he was a guy that was benched by Leo Campana, and looks like he was going to end his Inter Miami career on a whimper. Oh, that definitely did not happen. He definitely had a comeback of the ages in the second half of the season. Really kind of got hot in the last 2 months of the season, and just single-handedly carried this Inter Miami team into the playoffs. Like, you look at all the games that Inter Miami won down the stretch to make that late playoff push, every single game Gonzalo Higuain was on the score sheet, and kind of just shows a flash of Higuain during his prime, and that, there's even some question the fact that maybe he decided to push the retirement button a little bit too early. But nevertheless, it is kind of sad the fact that eventually he did had his career comes to an end in the first round after Inter Miami lose to NYCFC, and even more dramatically, the fact that out of such a legendary career that Gonzalo Higuain has, he ended his career at City Field. I mean, that is just such a ironic and also kind of a disappointing way for him to finish his final game in his career at a baseball stadium. But yeah, overall, what a career Gonzalo Higuain has had, and I'll definitely be doing a career video about him in the near future. So from one great player that have a comeback season to a player that pretty much destroyed his reputation with a club in the fastest way. So remember Jose Mari, and remember there was a game where he came on for Sporting KC, and then literally Peter Vermees decided to sub him off because of how bad he was playing. Yeah, that's exactly the game that I'm talking about, where I think it was only like 27 minutes of action, and he basically did absolutely nothing for the entire game. And this is already at the point where a lot of Sporting KC fans were fed up with Jose Mari and how he's not. He's pretty much a liability to this team. Well, this was really the final straw, because literally a couple of days later, after he was subbed off in that game, he was immediately cut by the team. And that, yeah, I mean, if you want to see a situation a player can just damage their reputation with your own club in such a quick fashion, that is a great example of it. And it just kind of shows you as a lot of these players, you can't take anything for granted. You need to, of course, perform always at your best, because if you put in even one bad performance, and especially if you already have the reputation of not doing very well with the club, if you put one bad performance and just completely stink it up, you can definitely find yourself in the unemployment line, as what we saw with Jose Mari. Now at number 15, the Columbus Crew completely self-destructing in the final 15 in stoppage time at record pace down the stretch. So I have mentioned many times before with the Portland Timbers and how they also kind of self-destruct multiple times during that 2020 COVID season, and that I know Timbers fans are probably kind of sick of me always mentioning that over and over again in 2021. But I think, the Columbus Crew, they probably saw that as a challenge, and they kind of took that to the next level, because not only they self-destruct in the final 15 minutes in multiple games this season, they also did it in stoppage time too, and they did it in record pace. 11 points drop in stoppage time this season. That is the most out of any team that has ever gave up in terms of points in stoppage time, whether it's late goals to concede the equalizer or late goals to lose the game. That's what the Columbus Crew did in stoppage time. And that, yeah, it's not a big surprise that eventually Caleb Porter was fired from this team, and that it's also no surprise that this kind of self-destruction that they created themselves really cost them the playoffs. I mean, that last game against Orlando City pretty much just sums up the second half of the season for the Columbus Crew, where they were just imploding at a rate where they just cannot close out games. And we talked about many times before, if you don't close out games, you are definitely in serious trouble, and that the Crew were able to do so in that final game, where they blow one more late leads in the final 15 of the game, just to shows you how this team is definitely going to be considered as one, if not the most disappointing team this season. I mean, with the talent that the Columbus Crew has had, there is no way in the world this team should be missing the playoffs like they did last season. And then at number 16, Paul Rushing becoming probably the first medical trainer to get sent off in a game. So this was a game between NYCFC versus the Philadelphia Union, where Paul Rushing basically came on, but as he was about to treat one of his injured player, yeah, he definitely got a bit of a dust up with a couple of the NYCFC player, but the referee was just having none of it. I think he also kind of maybe pushed somebody, and eventually the referee said, yeah, you're of course gonna be sent off. And I think that moment is probably the most MLS and peak MLS moment that is possible, because who would have thought that out of anybody to get sent off in a game, that a medical trainer would be that. I mean, I that is just something that you never see happen, and the fact that of course happened just to show you why MLS sometimes it's just a wacky league. I mean, I never would have thought that a medical trainer can get sent off, and that I even jokingly say that, well, what's going to happen to him? Is he going to get maybe a suspension where he's not going to be allowed to be the trainer? And what if the union has an injury? Who's going to be their main medical trainer, since the one that they have is currently suspended? But yeah, I mean, that was just such a wacky moment. Definitely going to go down as one of the wackiest and one of the most strangest moment we have ever seen in this league history. And then at number 17, Wayne Rooney coming back to DC United, but this time as a head coach. So, Wayne Rooney, we know that he has started to kind of get into his coaching career with Derby County and stuff, but we never thought that he was going to come back to MLS. And out of all teams, DC United to be the one to be the head coach of the team. Like, when Wayne Rooney left DC, I thought that was kind of the end of him with any relationship with DC and maybe any chance of coming back to MLS, but nope. Fast forward a couple of years later, he's now back as the head coach, and really in some way kind of a surprise. It's kind of hiring too, because as much as I know a lot of DC fans love Wayne Rooney and what he has done to the team during his latter part of his career, I didn't think that he was going to come back and just simply be a head coach there, and time will tell whether or not if that is kind of the right move, or the fact that was a complete panic hiring for DC, just so that the front office can maybe distract the fan that, hey, we're not doing a good job right now. I know we've been getting a lot of heat, but here's Wayne Rooney. We'll use this as a way to distract the fact that at least we're hiring one of your fan favorite to now be the main head coach of the team, even though, doing his short stint right now, he hasn't really shown to be the right guy to really guide out just such a big mess that DC have left ever since Hernan Losada just completely run this team to the ground. And then at number 18, Wilfried Nancy. Sour relationship with Montreal, and eventually left to go to the Columbus Crew. So not many people might not know this, the fact that Wilfried Nancy, he came very close in terms of quitting Montreal in the middle part of the season. I mean, there was definitely sources that were confirming the fact that he was definitely having some fallout with the front office, and especially with the owner Joey Saputo, and it was getting to a point where Wilfried Nancy almost thought that he was going to decide to quit before he decided to stay there for the rest of the season. I mean, if that of course does happen, I would have think that would have been definitely probably one of the biggest shocker of the year, with the way that he decided to leave in the middle of the season because of that, because up to that point everything was going well for Montreal. And I think if Nancy did actually left during that time, I don't think Montreal would have had much success down the stretch or heading into the playoffs, and maybe have their usual second half collapse that they've shown many times before. Because as much as the players on this team definitely have shown a lot of quality, a lot of credit has to go to Wilfried Nancy of how he has really organized this team to be just such a tough team to beat. And that, yeah, again, we talk about a lot of losses that Montreal have suffered that is going to definitely be a factor heading next season, but I argue no bigger loss has to be with their head coach Wilfried Nancy going to Columbus, and that, getting Hernan Losada as their new head coach. I know Hernan Losada has kind of tried to say the right things and have said that he's going to change his way that he did with DC United to his time with Montreal, but we don't know if that, of course, is going to be the case, especially when resort is not going to turn well for Montreal. The fans are going to quickly turn Hernan Losada, knowing what his reputation that he did, and the damaging reputation that he did during his time with DC United. And then at number 19, Garv Lagerwey leaving Seattle to join Atlanta United as their new president. So this one was kind of a little bit surprised because of the way that Garv Lagerwey was re-elected as the sporting director with the Seattle Sounders, and it seems like he was going to stay there for a long time. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he decided to pull a 180 and becoming as the new president of Atlanta United. And again, that was kind of a bit of a sucker punch if you're a Sounders fan, because what Garv Lagerwey has built during his time with the Seattle Sounders is nothing short of miraculous, and also just something that we rarely have seen in the American sports kind of culture, with building a team to be competitive years after years. And there's no doubt that loss is definitely a bit felt for with the Seattle Sounders, even though they have definitely got a good second option in Craig Wable there. But him going to Atlanta United and knowing the fact that he is going to be joining a team that is not afraid to open the pockets, and now that Garv Lagerwey is in charge, I know he's probably going to find ways to maybe fix the front office, and especially put a lot of pressure on Carlos Bocanegra. I mean, we talk about Carlos Bocanegra and Gonzalo Pineda being in hot water after just a disastrous season for Atlanta United. Oh, you better believe that they are almost on the verge of dropping into that hot water if they don't perform for this upcoming season, because there's no doubt that I think Garv Lagerwey will not hesitate to fire Carlos Bocanegra if this is going to be another failure of a season that Atlanta United will have. And then finally, in terms of number 20, and unfortunately, I hate that I had to end the interesting storyline video with a death, but we gotta have to mention the tragic sudden death of Graham Wall that happened in the World Cup. And again, you know, it was just a very shocking loss. Like, when it was first announced, I don't think a lot of people would have believed that of course happened. And obviously, we talked about how there was definitely suspicion that foul play might have been involved, but in the end, it looks like he did had some health issue coming into this tournament, and he's also been having just problems in terms of even getting some rest because of the non-stop coverage that he's been have to do. But again, even that, it is definitely a shock loss, and just such a tragic loss too, because Graham Wall has meant a lot to the American soccer landscape, especially in the media. A lot of media members and a lot of press members have really started to cover MLS because of what they saw Graham Wall has, and kind of inspired them to do what they like to do. So yeah, it is definitely a very tragic loss, and that's certainly one that I don't think we're gonna forget for a very, very long time, and that the legacy of Graham Wall will definitely be living on, even though he tragically passed away just this season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms, or not this season, I'm sorry, but this year exactly. But anyway, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these interesting storyline, and have I left any interesting storyline in 2022 in MLS? If I did, let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.